Well, good morning. Well, as you can see from your program, we have gathered together a wonderful cast of characters for you today. Characters. Yeah. Wonderful. I did say wonderful. All of whom are on the cutting edge in their field and who bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to inform you and inspire you. All right, thank you very much. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jim to introduce the panel and get going.
Thanks, Luann, and good morning, everyone. Can you hear me all right back there? Great. Just very briefly, oh, thank you. There's a watch right here. I can time myself.
Oh, you Luddite. That used to be his email.
Well, we're going to get the goods on each other today. Well, let me briefly explain what we're going to do here this morning on the panel. I'm going to introduce everyone and give the three panelists that are responding to Maria Rodell's talk of last night a chance to express some thoughts of theirs, and then we'll open it up for questions for the last 15, 20, maybe 25 minutes. Of this time frame that we're working with. And if you have a question, please raise your hand, and if need be, I'll repeat it or have the respondent repeat it. And with that, most of you, I believe, were here last night. I'm going to keep the introductions pretty brief, but I wanted to again introduce Maria Rodell, who's the CEO and Chairman of Rodell Incorporated. And she has brought with her the Organic Manifesto, which we're going to be discussing this morning, and she presented on last night, how organic farming can heal our planet, feed the world, and keep us safe. On my right is Andy Sponsor, who is from Missoula and is proprietor, along with his partner, of Ken Spoon Winery up the Rattlesnake. And Andy has been a past city commissioner here and pipe fitter, and I don't know Andy that well. I've been up to the winery only once, and I see that your tasting room is now open, and I'll have to come up more often. So I'm looking forward to that. But welcome, Andy. And then on my left is Neva Hassanen, who's an associate professor of environmental studies, or assistant professor of environmental studies at the University of Montana. Neva I've known for many years, but going back to when she was a staff person for Northern Plains Resource Council, and later, now some years ago, for the Northwest Coalition for Alternatives to Pesticides as a policy wonk there. I happened to be on the board at the same time, and I think Neva's still on the board of NCAP. And I know that she's inspired a legion of environmental studies students, graduate students who have gone on and are really doing some amazing work in different capacities around Montana and elsewhere. Also, she's the only person that I know that has a backyard chicken tractor. And very good eggs. I actually had breakfast with her a few weeks ago as I came back from Oregon with a large quantity of frozen organic blueberries. And on my far left and your right is Bob Quinn. And Bob and I go back also for many years. I've been to his farm many times, sometimes conducting farm tours for especially Arrow. And I think most of you probably know Bob, and I won't say a whole lot other than maybe the most interesting thing that I've ever seen happen on farm tours has happened at his farm, when I've seen skeptical soil scientists have an epiphany when they see his soil building cropping system. that really performs. And if you haven't been to Bob's Farm, go visit the next farm tour. He has them almost annually. So with that, if you want to learn more, there's bios on each of the people in your programs. But let us begin. And I've asked Bob, if you would, to be the first respondent this morning. But before I do that, there were five major points that Maria made last evening in her presentation about why modern organic farming can really solve a lot of our problems and make our agricultural system work and actually feed the millions of the world without the necessity of what is being touted by a so-called, what formerly some of us might have called the conventional food system, and at Maria's urge, and she's asking us to call it the chemical food system. And the five areas that she spoke to was basically that organic is better than local, and I know that that'll create some lively discussion this morning. That organic is healthier than chemical foods, that organic can stop global warming and climate chaos, that organics can feed the world, and that modern organic farming is the key to saving our world. And then she went on to list several formidable foes that we'll have in the process of educating and convincing people on these points that she made. Number one, the chemical companies and modern agribusiness are obviously very formidable foes, and their linguistic framing of arguments has maybe got out ahead of us, or has certainly kept us to a much smaller relevance than what we should have in terms of market shares, and the consumers are confused about the difference between organic and natural, and that there's a lot of issues around that. And lastly, that we need to become more activist-oriented and demand organics in our actions, and step it up, take it to a new level, so that we're the ones that are proactive and not defensive. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Quinn.
Thanks, Jim. So, do I still have 2 minutes? I got my watch out too.
Okay.
Because for me, 10 minutes is like a night blink almost. But anyway, let me also extend again another warm welcome to Maria. We're just thrilled to have you here, and I was thrilled to be asked to be on this panel to talk a little bit about my thoughts about your book, which if any of you don't have a copy yet, don't leave home without it. And it's fantastic. And I'd like to share some of my thoughts about reading it. I've read it twice now because it's better than 5 o'clock news, I'll tell you that. The thing that I would like to start out commenting about is the title itself, the subtitle actually. Since I started in organic farming, and that's been it'll be 25 years ago, here pretty quick, the comments that made to me over and over is, well, that's nice, niche, it's very interesting, but it will never feed the world. And I am thrilled to see a book come out declaring on the cover that this is not only can feed the world, but probably as you read through the pages, the only sustainable and long-lasting opportunity we have to feed the world. Because what we have now in chemical agriculture is certainly not sustainable. It's an unsustainable system, propped up only by large government subsidies. And I talked to Maria about this. She mentions government subsidies in the book here. And out west, where we live and farm, particularly east of the mountains where we're into grains a lot, we are also receiving subsidies. Everybody is receiving subsidies. And the great thing about organic agriculture, it gives us an opportunity not to depend on those, and not to farm the farm, and not to farm the government, I mean, but actually to farm the farm to try to make our own living. The subsidies that I've been receiving, I've been putting into research, and I'm kind of thankful for those, but because it really gives me an opportunity to expand on those research ideas. But when I was a chemical farmer, and I love, and as Jim mentioned it too, I love the designation of chemical farmer instead of conventional. But when I was a chemical farmer in the mid-'80s, and the grains and the subsidies then were not so different than now, we had an average size farm, which in Montana is about 2,500 acres, and we were about 2,400. Our annual subsidies ranged in the neighborhood of $25,000 to $27,000 a year. And our chemical bill, guess what? Our chemical bill averaged in the neighborhood of $26,000 to $27,000. Now, I didn't really make the connection on that until many years later when I started thinking, the only way I could afford those chemicals, or anybody could have afforded them, or still does afford them, is really with a check from the U.S. Treasury. Otherwise, there's not enough money to pay for those. And it appears to me that the chemical companies have devised a very unique plan to receive a good deal of federal money that goes through a farmer's checkbook. And when Maria is calling for an end to chemical agriculture and subsidies, to me that would really be a death toll to chemical agriculture. And it would force everybody to really look at alternatives. And organic agriculture is a great alternative. It's a viable one. It's the only one that can go on and on. When we're talking about the third world, they can't afford these chemicals. For heaven's sakes, who's going to pay for those? But organic agriculture is really the answer there. The other thing that I was glad to read that she brought up is she talked right away about yields. And it was the same thing that we've seen on our farm. In average years, our yields are about the same as county averages. In really fantastic years of huge rainfalls like this year, we fall significantly behind. We're just talking about yields of our chemical neighbors. But in drought years that we've had one rain year in 17. It's been 17 years on our farm since the last rain year. That's 1993. That's a long time ago. And in those 17 years, we've had lots of drought years, which I don't need to tell you guys about that. And in drought years, we are actually many times above the neighborhood. And in drought years, you all know, it's not how much money you make, it's how much money you lose. And if you can minimize the losses by not having a big chemical bill, it's a huge help to continue on. The thing that I also think, and Maria alluded to it, although it didn't make a heading all by itself, is this is a system to help save the farm, the family farm. And she alludes to that many times. But not only can it save the health of the planet and the environment and all these other things that she's talking about and feed the world and keep us safe, but it also is an answer to the farm crisis that we're in the middle of. As you know, or maybe you don't know, but I'm a member of Farm Bureau and Grain Growers, and I enjoy going to their meetings, not because I agree with what they say, but because I get to hear what they say. And they get to hear what I say, but they don't like what I say too much. But they still let me talk, it's okay. They keep touting the notion that our manifest destiny is to feed the world. And I take exception to that. The great agricultural system that we've had in this country is resulted in fewer and fewer farms year by year. If it's so successful and so great, why are people going broke? Why are not fathers encouraging their sons to stay and return to the farm and continue the family farm? That's not happening in our neighborhood. I mean, people are leaving, still leaving, left and right. We're still having farm auctions every year. And I think that's a tragedy. And it's a bad mentality. One of my neighbors, not too far away, says he'd like to have the only yard light that he can see. And I thought, well, I guess that's pretty good if you have a Robinson Crusoe mentality, or don't like neighbors. But this is the wrong way to go, and this is a direction that's driven by just success equaling big and bigger and growing. And adding the next farm to yours. Organic agriculture gives us an opportunity to reverse that, because first of all, it's too much work to add another farm to yours, because unless you're going to figure out how to manage all that. Most people aren't really interested in doing that. So I think it gives an opportunity for long-term success and long-term profitability. Because even though we might not be taking big yields, bragging rights on big yields, at least we're making more trips to the bank to make deposits rather than withdrawals. And I think that's a good position to be in. The other thing that she quoted in her book, and I love this quote, if organic, and she's quoting some farmer, our chemical farmer, if organic is so much better for you, why don't we see any advertising saying that? Well, I've often asked the same question myself. But who's going to pay for that advertising? Because what do we have to sell? We have to sell a good lifestyle and a profitability, but we're not really making money on that individually to give us a base to go on and buy advertising minutes. But what we can do, and this is what I think we should do, we should be at our schools and volunteering to offer seminars or discussions, and so our school, starting at our high school, our high school students in ag hear that there's an alternative to chemical agriculture. Hear your stories, that how much more fun it is, how much more successful it is, how much more profitable it is. Many of us have been involved with agriculture, with university lectures. NEVA is really good about inviting organic farmers in. I've been to U of M and MSU giving lectures, and it's really amazing when the students get a chance to hear an alternative. There are things we should be at the fairs, at the county fairs, and the state fairs. At least the certifiers should be, or somebody should be there saying, here's some ways that you can convert, and here are people to call and we can answer questions. But MOA could maybe, of course, MOA doesn't have any money. I need to say about that in a minute. We need to be there. We need to be right along. We're not going to have a glitzy booth as Monsanto. We don't need to worry about that. But we need to be there. We need to have a presence there. And I think that's really, really important. The other thing that she mentioned is having a unified voice is precisely what we lack. And she said that last night very eloquently. And that is so, so important. We can't afford the luxury to be discussing whose type of organic is better than another. We don't have that luxury. We are a small group, and we need to be united. We have a cause. We have a cause we can believe in, a cause that's right. It's great to be on the right side, cause you can be proud of. It's not a cause to build a huge complex or a huge nonprofit or a huge anything. It's a cause to save the family, farm and agriculture that does all these things that Maria's talking about, and promoting health and nutrition and a way of life that sustains us, that can be not controlled by outside because we're such a small group. The other thing I'd like to mention on that, how are we doing? Okay, anything. Getting back to education, because she mentioned that last night. We have in this group, and I'm probably going to offend somebody, but anyway, it's not that I don't care, but I want to say it. I think it's very important that we really start putting some of our money where our mouth is. We have a Living Lightly application of a membership that's $15 a year. That doesn't even pay for the expense of being a member. This is absurd. This is absurd. We spend, I bet you, people spend way more than $15 a month on coffee even. Not that, I know there's some coffee people here. And that's fine, but let's balance things a little bit. I think that the contributions that we need really are important. We need to have enough money at least to put our message out, and at least to help pay people to help us do that. Boy, it's really important. You look at the money that was spent on this last election, in putting message out, that's what the money's spent on. And then you look at the kind of messages and the amount of money that's spent by Monsanto and their buddies by putting their message out, and then you look at the amount of money that we put out and put our message out. No wonder it doesn't hardly make, page 10. And we need to not be afraid and not begrudge newspapers and magazines when they like a little advertising money. There's nothing the matter with a little advertising money to help. They need to be in business too. But we need to get our message out, and we need the funds to do that. And I would really encourage us to dig down a little deeper. And if this is a cause we really believe in, it certainly equals, a few cups of coffee a month, or even a couple boxes of Duluth cereal. How's that? So anyway, we need to put things in perspective. I think that's really, really, really important. Let's see. The other thing I wanted to just mention very briefly, Rita mentioned substituting the idea of regenerative with sustainable. And I really like that too, because in my mind, regenerative is soil building. That's one aspect of it. We create better farms by building our soils, and there's ways to do that, but it's important that it's done. In the early days, I remember in this state, we had big debates if summer fallow was a soil building. Anybody remember that? And just letting the field be idle, not really adding anything to it. We know that when you discuss those kinds of things, that is really soil mining. And you can only mine something as long as there's still gold there. And the problem with a mine is, at some point you reach the bottom of it. And it's no different with your farm. If you do not take an active role in soil building, or however it's done, and remember it talks a lot about compost, most of us don't have that luxury because we don't live to a place where it's easily available, or we have a nitrogen source. But if you don't grow green manures or do something with cover crops or something to build your soil, you're actually mining it, and you'll reach a point someday when the mine is empty. This soil in this state has been farmed mostly for less than 100 years. Imagine that. When some places in this earth, people have been farming for 6,000 years nearly. And we have been farming this soil for less than 100. And yet, for those farms that have been farmed for 100, I can tell you for sure, you've reached the end of the bottom of the mine. If you've been farming some ground for less than 30, you probably still have a ways to go. But why go to the bottom of the mine? Let's start now to regenerate and rejuvenate our soils and our crops. Let me see if let me end then with one thought that Maria ended last night with, a thought from the last page of her book, but it wasn't the last thing she wrote. So she talked, for those of you who are there, which for most of you, it was a great talk about being ultimately one tribe. After that, she says, we have a choice. Which future will we choose? And this is really so important. Every time we go to the grocery store, we make a choice. Let me say one more thing on that. When and I had this mentality when I first started. I remember saying to my good friend Dave Boyd, and I know he's here somewhere, and we were talking about getting organic goods delivered to our home. I said, gosh, Dave, it's kind of expensive. And Dave really straightened me out on that concept. He said, well, in so many words, he says, well, are you getting a little more for your grain than you used to? And I said, well, yeah, yes. And then he said, well, is it not right that the apple grower should not get a fair price? And on down the line, he named enough that I got the point real quick. And, so I had to change the way I thought about that too. And I think we all need to reach a point where we put the proper value on what we eat and what we buy and how we really support each other. Because we can't think that, well, I want a big price for my stuff, but I don't want to pay someone else's fair price. That's completely unreasonable, bogus. But we need to change the concept in this country from cheap food to food that sustains and nourishes us. We don't want to just be well-fed in this country, and we are very well-fed. We want to be well-nourished. And that costs a little more to be well-nourished. But yet, if we think about paying a little more at the checkout counter and a lot less at the doctor's office years down the road, it's not so hard to make that choice. And especially for young kids and whatnot, I'm giving my daughters, so they can feed my grandkids, as much organic stuff we grow off our own farm as I can. And I'm encouraging them to make up the difference at the organic markets wherever they are. Because I think it's really important that the kids are off to a proper start in health-wise. Anyway, she goes on. So we must choose. We will choose. We will choose. So it's how we choose. That's what's important. We can't afford incremental change. So we need transformative change. That means the whole grocery basket. If we can afford it. Maybe we can cut down some other things. I mean, is it more important to go to a movie or a ball game, or to feed your family, pay a little bit more at the grocery store. That's how I kind of try to think of it. We need an organic revolution. I love that. Our survival depends on it. This is my organic manifesto, and we're going to take my hat off to you. You've done a great job, and I hope that it goes all over the country like a wildfire. Thank you.
Good morning. I am honored to be here this morning. Thanks everyone for coming. Thanks for inviting me. And thanks Maria for joining us here in Montana. And it's an honor to be at the table with you. I was reminded of, when I was thinking about coming here, of the days when I was in graduate school at the University of Wisconsin, and I would go down into the stacks and pull out these old issues of organic farming and gardening that J.I. Rodale was publishing back in the 50s and 60s, and I was very interested in how he was really starting to build an alternative at that time of organic agriculture and articulating that in this incredible language that is very colorful. I encourage you all to go look at it, and I think that he'd be very proud of you in continuing the tradition of speaking truth to power. What I want to kind of pick up where Bob left off in terms of how social change happens. What is incremental change? What is transformative change? Those are issues that are of interest to me as a scholar and as an activist. And I also, I guess, want to start off by, thinking a little bit about the title of this panel. Whether how organic can feed the world. And the origin of that, as Bob said, is somewhat that industrial agriculture has largely said, we're the model of feeding the world. And today we produce more food, more calories than the people in the world can actually eat. But that we still have a tremendous number of people going hungry. Actually, a historical high. A couple weeks ago was World Food Day. Over 1 billion people on the planet suffer from hunger or food insecurity. That has never been the case in human history. We also produce more food than we ever have. So the question about feeding the world isn't really a question of production per se. But the title also reminded me of a great piece which I had forgotten, was published in Organic Gardening magazine in 2000 by Donella Meadows, called How Organic Farming Can Feed the World. And Donella Meadows, you might remember, was one of the authors of the Limits to Growth report, which came out in the early 70s, which had a huge impact on people really recognizing, although we didn't talk about it in these terms at the time, but recognizing the unsustainability of our current growth patterns. And in it, she takes to task this notion that only industrial agriculture can feed the world, and their message, which she called TINA, there is no alternative, that was the message that was put out there, that there is no alternative. And people like Dave Land and Bob and many others of you have shown that organic farming systems work, and they can work well. And other scholars have also shown that they can be productive, particularly in times of drought, and more productive sometimes than industrial systems. And so the question, I think has been put to rest of whether or not organic systems can feed the world. The question I want us to think about is, will they? And how would they come about doing that? And what do we actually mean by organic and feeding the world? Do we mean only organic certified systems? And, do we mean USDA organic, and are we gonna, when we say united we stand, is it united we stand behind those standards as if they are perfect? And they are not. And neither is local. And neither is fair trade. But they're important alternatives, right? So what we've seen, I think, is over the last 25 years, is that through a variety of market-based alternatives, people have shown that they can work. But the question is, will they? And I realized as I was thinking about this panel today as well that it's 20 years since the Organic Food Production Act was passed. And about 10 or 15 years before that, we started seeing organic certification systems around the country. And those systems were set up in order to provide some level of integrity so that when you purchased a product and you'd know if it was certified organic, you'd know that it was grown according to certain standards. And you may not agree with all those standards, but you could go find out what they were, right? So you can't do that in most conventional or industrial systems. And the market has been a tremendous tool for the organic industry and actually transformed the organic movement into an industry. And the market is an incredibly powerful thing. We are all deeply embedded in this market-based economy. Andre is exactly right in the remarks that Trevor read last night. And it's been a really useful thing to grow this industry over 20% a year over the last 20 years. And there's been amazing gains. And part of that is a reaction by consumers that I think Maria is really trying to speak to in many ways in this book, who are concerned about their health. And it's people's public health, personal health concerns, and the concerns about their kids that really have driven the increase in organic sales. So, for instance, when the Alar issue came to light around the late 1980s, that just led to a boom in organic sales. Similarly, when recombinant growth hormone, RBGH, came on the market, organic milk just took off. Organic Valley, I was in Wisconsin, Organic Valley was this little teeny tiny cooperative in Lafarge. If you've been to Lafarge, I mean, it's a little bigger than Big Sandy, but not much. And, and after that, it just took off because consumers are concerned about milk. And my friend Kiki talks about milk being a gateway to organics because parents want to feed their kids, what they perceive to be a purer product. But it's not just a market-based approach. The market has enabled and created a base of consumers that care about organic. And those consumers were mobilized dramatically when the USDA's draft rules came out in 1997, remember that? And they included genetic engineering and sewage sludge and irradiation, and those were the ones that we knew about, and there were lots of other things that people like Bob and Lynn Cody and others were really concerned about in those draft rules as well. But consumers came out and spoke out against those draft rules in record numbers. The USDA had never received so many comments. 275,000 people, and it was largely consumers who did not want to see those things in their products. So the market-based approach has been hugely successful. Oh, I gotta stop. Okay, well, I'll wrap it up here. But I guess the thing I want to say is that I think it's actually it's a limiting thing as well, because organics has been created around this niche market. It is the 97-3. And it's the premiums that are enjoyed by organic products that have motivated many new growers to get into it. And that's an okay thing, but will organics actually, use this market-based strategy to take over and then change the rest of the dominant system? Will that dominant agricultural system actually destroy organics with genetically modified organisms? The National Organic Program is not at all equipped to deal with GMOs. It excludes them, but there's nothing there to protect the seed from being contaminated. And that's a real concern, that right there. When consumers find out that they spend all this energy to get GMOs excluded from the National Organic Program, and then in fact, this food can be contaminated, that was a serious, serious threat to the integrity of the organic industry and to other non-GMO farmers. So there's a need for a much broader policy approach. The National Organic Action Plan came out early this year, and I encourage you all to look at it. It's extremely detailed and useful. We can talk more about it. I guess I want to say, can I say two more things? Okay. Look, organic, fair trade, local, to some extent, they've almost all taken a market-based approach, and it's been successful. But none of them are perfect, and we need to go beyond just these niche markets. And the question is, how do you go beyond that? We need to go from being food consumers to being food citizens, and take back control of our food system, not let organic get completely dominated by the large multinational food processors. Last year, when Sandra Steigraber was here in Missoula, and she gave this incredible talk, and at the end, people in the audience kept saying, but what can I buy? You know, tell me what to buy so that I'm not supporting these things. And she said, when this country abolished slavery, it was not because a bunch of people said, I'm not going to buy one. And that just rings through my mind often. And I leave you with that thought. What are the limits to this market-based approach? It's been tremendously powerful, but where do we go from here? Thank you.
Folks that are standing in the hall outside, I count maybe a dozen chairs in the first 3 rows that are unoccupied. It'd be great if you could come up here and join us up here. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Andy.
Well, thanks, Jim. Thank you, Ms. Rodale, for sharing your time with us. I know that the Rodales and Mike, closer, better. I hate these things. I'm just trying to speak louder, for sure. Thank you very much for contribution you've made to our society and certainly to agriculture. I kind of struggled trying to figure out what to say here. Probably in an agricultural sense, the least qualified to talk with all of you about these subjects, but been a few places, so I'll give it a little bit of an effort here. Connie Poten and I started Ten Spoon Vineyard about 13 years ago, and we'd both been out in the world doing other things. Connie is a writer, and I was a tradesperson. But I'd also been involved as well in public process and community action, neighborhood action, land conservation, energy conservation, and any number of things like that, and involved on a local level. In fact, there's a couple of us in the room here tonight, I think, that are alumni of the Missoula City Council. Luann Crowley and I both served on the council at the same time and had some interesting experiences, learned a lot for sure. I think the most important thing that I reduced this all to, after I thought about it for some time, about what I wanted to say to you, was how important it is to understand the sense of place. Montana is a real special place, and certainly your communities that you live in are special places, and that's where things happen. It's where the most important things happen. It's where our family interaction and our friendships happen. It's where most of our work happens. In today's world, though, with electronics and petro transportation, a lot of those things get exported, and our focus becomes diluted, and that's been a threat to our sense of place and local and our communities and our relationships, especially with the land. So I wanted to talk about what my experience has been with the vineyard and selling wine, making wine here at home, a value-added agricultural product, if you will. We've been all the way around the loop with the thing. We started out kind of starry-eyed about growing something and adding value to it, and the whole concept of terroir, if you're familiar with that, that's what the French talk about in terms of place and agricultural products, and especially wine. So we were pretty starry-eyed about all that, and we realized all of a sudden that it's not a perfect world, and this world's been pretty influenced by the forces out there of the mass market. Mass market makes it pretty tough for little guys to go out and present a quality, locally produced product and compete, even in your own hometown, because the allure of inexpensive products every day in a society that seems to be influenced by the lowest common denominator every day, that's pretty tough stuff to do. And I know most of you out here have run up against the very same thing. So we devised unique products. We conjured up really interesting packaging. We learned how to market ourselves wide and far and wide. And over the last 8 years that we've been making, 9 years that we've been making wine, I've come to the conclusion that even though all those forces are making it hard to do business at home and the common denominator has been lowered pretty badly, the strength for all of us is still at home. The thing that's kind of shocking, though, is that 8% of the food consumed in Montana is actually made or produced here. So what does that mean? If you're going to have resolve to do it at home, grow it, add value to it, and sell it at home, what are you going to do in the marketplace like that? It doesn't look too bright, actually. The conclusion that I've come to with the winery is that we're going to amp up our communication with the people of Montana and our region to let them know that we have a quality, well-built product here at home that's available to them. And that's where we sell 95% of our product here in Montana anyways. I about beat my brains out trying to sell wine in other places, and I found out that I couldn't overcome the powers of the mass marketplace. So I'm going to spend more of my effort trying to make sure that we sell more than 8% of the food products in Montana to Montanans. And I think that's absolutely important. If we can't do that, then what can we do? I mean, ask yourself that question. If we can't get Montanans to consume more than 8% of locally grown and produced products, value-added products, then we're in pretty sad shape, I'd say. So that's number one. I agree with almost it. When I read Maria's book, I I agreed with almost everything in there. The only thing that I take some exception to is a qualifier that organic is better than local. I'm changing track here just a bit, but I'd have to say that in my experience, what's wrong with the world is that we've abandoned local, and we've abandoned doing basic things for ourselves. We've taken to shipping commodities and things that most people can produce for themselves around the world, all over the world, to other people. I mean, we ship shoes around the world, we ship grain around the world, we ship table wine around the world. This is a ridiculous concept. We spend gross amounts of energy and human effort moving things around all over the world that could easily be produced at home. And so here comes that 8% deal again. Why are we doing this? And it's because we've allowed people to convince us that the lowest common denominator is okay, that everything can be had for a cheaper price. You can have everything at a lower and lower price, and it's seductive. So in the end, though, we found out that we have a huge burden in our state with people that are unemployed. We have a decreasing tax base to accomplish important public goals and community goals. All those things are starting to fail because we're exporting basic jobs, adding value and growing things to places and taking jobs away from people in other places. And I believe you mentioned that in your book as well. I think it's criminal that we've become involved now in a system that takes jobs away from other people, and we've got to stop that. The best way we can solve all these things is to refocus on our local and regional markets and tell people we need to educate and inform people about why organic and why local is better. Let me tell you a little story. When Connie and I started the winery, we talked to a local advertising fellow here who's quite good. He does those cute little advertisements for Budweiser. He lives right here in Missoula, Montana. And, I love you, man, or you can't have my Bud. He's the guy that writes that stuff. And at any rate, Brian told Connie and I one day when we went in to try and devise some really nice labels for our material, he said, "You're not going to say organic on your label, are you?" And he said, that's really offensive to a lot of people. And, they think about dirty hippies and lazy people and, hokey claims of health and wholesomeness. He invoked that whole thing. And I was frankly shocked. And to tell you the truth, he never did a label for us. But I have to tell you, and I'm here to confess, folks. I kind of let that affect me because I've never put the USDA. Don't make me cry here. I've never put it on my label, and that's a shame. That's a shame. And so, Doug, I need to put that on my label from here on out. So, having
give
said
up the Montana label.
Having said that, there's two things that we need to get with the business of promoting, and that is made in Montana and made in your local community is number one. And the other thing is we need to inform people about why organic is more healthful, and being involved in an organic system of agriculture supports communities. I mean, let's face it, folks, there's no free lunch, and there really isn't a great big marketplace out there that's going to make us rich so that we can put money into mutual funds and live happily ever after we're 65 doing nothing. The bottom line is that most of us are probably going to be married to our farms and our businesses the rest of our lives as we are to our partners. So we might as well get to the business of explaining to people why organic is better. Because quite frankly, I've stood at the Good Food Store and I've watched people walk by organic products and beeline right to products that have even no claim to sustainability on the labels. And I find that offensive, to tell you the truth, especially in a store where if you walked in the door, you made a statement. There's a reason you went there instead of Albertsons or Safeway or XYZ. And you beeline right for a product that has no commitment to sustainability. I see it every day when I'm down there. So I ask myself, is that the Good Food Store's fault? Is that my fault? Whose fault is it? And it's partly my fault for the reason I just explained to you. I don't have the USDA label on there because some people think that that's kind of phony. But I'm doing a really poor job of explaining to people why it's really important. And I think if people had the information that it's about your health, it's not about being some hippie that's standing in a welfare line, you know, if you know what I mean. But I'm doing a poor job of explaining myself and educating. So there it is. It's really, maybe the Good Food Store and Andy Sponsler and Connie Poten could do a better job of that. But I suspect that all of us could do a better job of explaining ourselves to the marketplace. And so I just say thank you for coming here, because this little experience has caused me to think about a whole lot. Thanks.
Well, I want to thank the three panelists. I think there's some very good meat to chew on here, and maybe rather than me trying to interpret it, I'll just hand it over to Maria and let her respond.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. When I first heard you set up the panel, I thought, oh my gosh, it's like a tribunal. I'm not like in big trouble. But you all were very eloquent and generous, and I loved hearing your perspectives and your stories, so thank you. And I think you all hit on really important points that I'd love to elaborate some of my thoughts on. You know, some of the topics I heard was, you know, do we go mass? Do we stay niche? Is it regulation, or is it just the market-driven power? I mean, we now know it works. It can be done. So it's really about what's the next step. And I think it's a combination of both. And I'll tell you my hippie story, my organic hippie story. My kids all go to a local private school that, you know, they have fundraisers, and I auctioned off a visit to the Rodale Institute and lunch with me, and this couple came. They spent pretty much money, and I was shocked. And I found out quickly that the reason she bought the lunch was because she thought I could, in my day job as publisher, make her the next Martha Stewart. She really wasn't interested in finding out much about organic. But as we started talking, she's like, my kids, have all these allergies, and she even had like the rashes on their, on her cell phone. She's like, look at this, and I said, well, have you tried organic food? Because a lot of kids are allergic to the chemicals in food, and she's like, yeah, my friends have all said I should be feeding them organic food, but I'm afraid. And I said, well, what are you afraid of? And she goes, well, I'm afraid of going into that section of the supermarket, the hippie section. Or she said the organic section. I was like, well, what are you afraid of? She said, there might be hippies in there. Okay. You just paid a lot of money to have lunch with somebody who could be defined as a hippie. But I think, what I love studying social change in history too, and I think the roots of the hippie movement are about being alternative and being different. And we like that sense of being outsiders. But if we are going to make the change to the next level, I think we have to embrace the fact that we're all a little bit mass. I mean, we may be very rigorous about how we buy our food, but I'm sure a lot of us are also buying cheap T-shirts and you know, discount sneakers, and you know, and that's a different kind of mass. At the Organic Summit we were at the other week, there was a woman who wrote a book called Cheap. I think her name is Ellen Schupal, I don't know, but she's an MIT professor, and she looked at why people buy cheap stuff, and it basically is the part of the brain that is associated with gambling. So you basically get a rush every time you buy something. You buy something really cheap, and you feel like you've won, you know, the lottery. So you know, we're dealing with fighting, you know, complex human behavior. But I think the unifier of all of us, whether, you know, in all our lives, we're alternative parts and the mass parts, is health and concern about health, and that's where we have the strongest case to get active on a government government regulations in our communities, and you know, really kind of take it to the next level in terms of wanting to protect our health and protect our planet's health and our children's health. When I was, many years ago, I launched a magazine that no longer exists, unfortunately. It's called Organic Style, and everybody said that's an oxymoron. You know? And in certain communities, it's not anymore. You know, New York City organic is hip and cool, but you know, we in the magazine business are constantly researching the customers. Like, why did you buy this magazine? What, you know, what do you like? What do you not like? And again, we found the biggest reason people were coming to organic was for health reasons. So I guess the question I have that I don't know the answer to, and it goes back to Bob's quoting that farmer, it's my understanding that with the USDA regulations, you can't really make health claims.
We were not allowed. We were only allowed to say it was a system. We were certifying a system.
Right.
Process. We couldn't say anything about health. I was just thinking about that. That's the most interesting thing now. Now we have our foot in the door. It can speak for itself. That's what I think is great. And there are some spokesmen like what you're doing, but we cannot say as certifiers or with the organic label, this is healthier, I mean, by definition.
Right. So if someone or a group were to find money to advertise, does that mean we can't currently make those health claims, or can we? And is that something we should change?
If anybody does the research and makes a health claim based on research, sure. You can.
Yeah.
And now there's starting to be a lot of that available.
So I guess I would, you know, sort of end my few minutes by saying that's, I think, where, you know, that's the next frontier for us, is really organizing our message around health and embracing the diversity that's both mass and alternative in all of us. You know, we're all a little bit alternative and we're all a little bit mass, and local and organic is the ideal. And what are caps? Like, I was in the Good Food store yesterday, and there's a little tiny local section, and there was this caps syrup, like black caps. Does anybody know what black caps are? Anyway, it was a local thing, and I was like, that looks really interesting, but I don't know what that is. So, so I think local is awesome, and when people travel, they want that local experience. And you know, you don't want to go to McDonald's unless it's just because there's a bathroom there. The only time we've ever seen is just for that. So I just want to thank you all again. It's going to take all of us, and everybody here is doing amazing work, and I'm so proud and honored to have been invited here and to hear from you.
Thank you. I think at this time we'll open it up to audience questions. Oh, there's a hand already. Jeff.
I always ask questions. Good morning. Thanks. you ended a little bit saying, you know, the health is a transformation. And I know very much when I read Maria's book, it's something I always push, and there's a definite connection between health and the environment. They are two different words. And I think it's also important that we get our environmental friends to be very, very strong on our side and say this is an environmentally sound system. And this is a conservation system of agriculture, that we conserve our natural resources, that we improve our environment by adopting this system. Something we tend to also shy away from. And I think you made the point strong in the book, actually, much more than even your father and grandfather, because they were so connected to the health movement, that they didn't always accentuate as much as they could have the environmental and conservation benefits of organic agriculture. So I'd like a comment on that.
Do you want to repeat the question?
We're being taped, we're being taped.
Okay, so the question was really about making the connection stronger to the environmental movement and the benefits of organic on the environment. And I definitely see that as one of my major priorities in what I do every day. And I've already made connections with Larry Schweiger, who's the CEO of the National Wildlife Federation. I've met with Francis Beinecke, who's the Executive Director of the Natural Resources Defense Council. And I think, you know, getting them, it's not just the division within the organic community that's the problem. It's the division within the environmental community and the organic community and the, you know, the social justice people. So, so I think when we all put ourselves together, we're a huge group. And, but again, that's where, you know, the vegetarians versus the hunters gets into, you know, an issue. So I think we need to respect each other. Just like a great organic farm has a lot of diversity and thrives on diversity, we have to find ways to embrace